Hello everyone and welcome back to the article of the week, and today we'll be talking about a very interesting topic. It's also known as defund the global policeman. Now I'm sure that with the murder of George Floyd, you may have heard this term floating around. Defund the police, defund the police. You may have even heard the outcries of all the protesters who have been protesting in the US, especially in 2020. But the author of this article really maintains that the behavior of the police is very similar in America to that of their behavior in other countries, and this is how they go about it. So basically, the police in America has now become the new diplomat, and the reason for that is that there have been multiple incidents of the policemen acting as global diplomats, across the world. In favor of US. So what does US do is that it sends one of its top-notch police officers, and it makes a deal with the country that we're going to send in somebody who is experienced from our force, and they're going to teach your force how we handle it back here in America. So you see, America has this really sometimes some kind of a bossy image about people who keep it all under check, and it's like the big bad guy on the block, and it kind of sends its own police officers to other countries to teach their police force what to do and how to handle the public. Now, a very good example of this has been the policies of Theodore Roosevelt, the former US president. Now, you know that he was also the chief of the New York Police Department, if I'm not wrong, before he became the president. And one of the main things that he focused upon while he became the president was the fact that people who had gone outside to fight, undemocratic forces could come back and supply their skills, supply their expertise to the police force that is on the ground. So what would happen was that these soldiers, the military men who would go out and in Latin America would somehow establish order amongst this uncivilized people, the tribal people, people who would be carrying out covert operations. They could always come back, retire from the army, and then enlist themselves as what? As policemen within the US. And this is what has been happening, and that is why the people who have gone outside, the military men who are out there, and let's just be very honest, this is not a video against military people. This is a video that exploits you can say the ability of these people, and what it does is that it basically sends you out with a mission. It's an expansionist mission, it's an imperial mission. It tells you that the people you're going to govern outside, the people you're going to influence, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Nicaragua, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in Syria, these people are really below you, right? So you have got to go there and dominate them, and then once you retire, we're going to give you a very cozy position in your own police department, right? Once you retire from the military, you can come and become the police chief. And then what happens is that every racist ideology that you learned while you were there in that other country, every single imperialistic mindset that you came across, you become a concoction of all of that, and then you bring it back home. So it's almost as if you go out, right, you play in the mud, and you come back home smelling all the way across, right? And every single household you cross by, they're all like pinching their nose because you smell really bad. But you don't stop there, you also come back and you have the audacity to come inside your own home, and then you smell that bad right there. So that's how the global policemen are working. And we all know that US has been really good with the manipulation of the global tactics, or the global interpretation of a certain event in a way that it benefits their own geopolitical goals. So what did they do? After the World War II gets over, and during like the Cold War and all of it, they set up something which is known as Office of Public Safety, right? And what that organization did in US was that it really invited police forces of other countries to come and visit US, come and learn from us. We are all going to have a good time. We're going to teach about the tactics. And within these tactics, there was a targeted attempt to demonize every single communist country out there. Now, this is not a debate about whether capitalism is good or whether communism is better, but what I'm telling you is that these people promised other countries, which were of course poorer, that we're going to reform your police, they're going to be more efficient, and these people, they happily accepted. But what did they do? They gave you some very bad, some very lethal, some fatal methods of controlling the crowd. That's number one. But number two, they also give you an ideology that you did not ask for. They did not teach you that you would also be you will also be learning to hate a particular set of people simply because of what they believe in. So what we saw was that there were like a lot of countries who just started hating communism, and the simple reason was not that that they have all come up with this kind of reasoning that yes, communism is bad because of X, Y and Z. They simply hate communism because US told them to hate communism, because it told them to it told their police officers to hate communism. And these police officers went on to some of them went on to become some key politicians, and that's how the entire country's viewpoint towards communism really shifted itself, and that's where all the problem came from. Then of course there was like the 1974 statute that prohibited the use of AIDS to spread all of these geopolitical missions, but of course we always find a workaround. So yeah, while the governments really stayed away from providing funds, personal companies and corporates popped in, and they were the ones who were like, oh, you know what, you need help with your public administration, you need help with your police department, we are going to help you. And these were private companies. So you see, it's almost as if the US government created a business, then it tied its own hands and called itself moral because it was staying away from the dirty business, but then it allowed the private companies to actually take part into it and go ahead, have some fun. And this is what happened post 9/11 as well, because what we do know is that first of all, we already found a workaround, right? I mean, it's we found a workaround somewhere around like the Cold War. After the Cold War, we found a workaround of section 660, which was basically what prohibited us from dealing directly with the different police departments worldwide. When I mean us, I'm of course meaning US. But what happened after this was that even though the US did not interfere directly till post 9/11, we still had private companies which were trying to do this, and they were actually pretty good at it, right? Like I remember that there was an entire organization, it's known as the Saudi Personal Guard or something like that. That's all based on corporate money, man. It's actually larger than your Saudi military, but that's actually based on the techniques which have been taught by US forces by a private company, not even a government, right? And it's a fully functional force back in Saudi. Another thing that it did was that I already talked about how Office of Public Safety was meant to invite people in, and so that they can have a look at how the US government was handling things with police back at home. But what it also allowed was that different kinds of police officers would go on exchange programs abroad, and they would take their ideas from there, they would bring their own ideas to them, and so it created like this whole mix and whole concoction of using more and more brutal techniques, right? And we have already seen the critique of the Israeli Defense Forces, right? They use Krav Maga, which is their Israeli defense martial arts. I've got nothing against Krav Maga except that there are certain chokeholds, and then there are certain things which simply make it very, very hard for police officers to restrain themselves while they're in the heat of the moment. So why do you want to equip the police officer with fatal movements or with fatal techniques if you don't want civilians or suspects dying by their hand? That is my question. Why are you militarizing the police in some sense, right? Or why are you making the policemen go global, if that's the better way of saying it? So this is something that we really need to be focusing on, which nobody's focusing on, of course, because that would mean bad mouthing Israel. US would never want to do that, of course. And on top of everything, we created so many organizations, right? Like the US is very smart. They knew that if any one of these get caught up, and we get like prosecuted or something like that, then we might have to shut down the whole business. So what did they do? They created so many proxies, so many dummy organizations within their own government that it became practically impossible for anyone to shut them down completely, because there are just simply too many organizations doing the same exact thing. People within these organizations do not realize the different kinds of work that they are doing, because to them it's practically the same work, and they are right, it is the same work. The only reason that there is such kind of redundancy is because redundancy is preventing them from being one step away of getting wiped out completely. Because usually if you want to shut down a department, let's just say, then you can target one at a time, let's just say, and have like then too you will not have like a very good chance of actually shutting it down with just a single lawsuit. And it started making promises. The US government started making promises with countries worldwide that we are going to provide you services, we are going to provide you services. But of course the state did not want to be involved that much. So what did we do? Well, of course, this is where the private companies set in. You see, the US government would make an agreement from the government of a particular country that we are going to supply you police training and everything, but then it would default on it, right? And then someone else would enter. And who would this be? It's a private company, of course, right? So we have made like a capitalist market out of humanly derogatory techniques of policing, and that is what we have been worrying about. And perhaps the author states that it's not necessary now to reform anything. Perhaps it's just necessary to cut down. I do not care about the soldiers in Iraq being reformed or not. There is no need to reform them, just simply cut it down. We cannot take that much on reforms. Everybody talks about reform, but reforms do not exactly do anything. Maybe the only kind of reform that we actually need is to finally step down and for the US to stop with the global policeman. That's all for the article of the week. You can find all the links down in the description below. I'll see you next Sunday. Take care.